Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you all had a great Christmas and New Year's. As I said, there's two more things that I really wanted to show, and then I think we're probably done with this series. Plenty more that I could show in little parts, but these are just the main things to do with my base that are probably the most interesting and most significant as well. So this second last one is going to be to do with power, because a lot of the things you've done, and particularly what I showed you in my last video, they rely on a lot of power. So they've been big components of my base. I did talk about in probably my first video how I had a nuclear reactor which was set up. If I just go down here, it was set up in the middle here, so next to my original base, which is that wooden one over there. It was set up just right there. And it was a smaller version of this thing that's in front of you here. So this is a nuclear reactor. Okay, you can see it's got the fuel here. This is the temperature. It needs a water input as well, so that's what's here, which I'll show you as we walk past it. And it is creating steam, obviously because of the heat and the water, it's turning it to steam. So my original reactor didn't have the steam component because I was just using this as a energy source, all right, which it can be used for as well. But it's actually more efficient and generates more power if you use the turbines with it, which is what I've set up here, which I'll talk about after as well. So this was my original power source, although it was much smaller. It probably was only up maybe 10 or 12 blocks or something like that. All right, I do have the emerald blocks in there because that helps insulate the temperature in there. So it is very resource dependent as well. And all of these casing blocks need to be made out of uranium and graphite and a whole bunch of stuff. So it does take a fair amount of resources to set these up. So which is definitely not a initial game energy source, but I would have used it as my main energy source, as I said, for a little while in that small type of reactor down there. So that's the control panel. And then if we walk along, as I said, it does need a water input, which is this, and it's coming from the sink that I've set up here. So it needs a constant flow of water because you want that steam. And then I've also just hooked it up to my ME system so that the uranium, the ingots that are being processed downstairs automatically are inputted here. And then this one's for the output. So if you know anything about nuclear reactors, it does also have the output. Once it's used up the uranium, it comes back out as depleted uranium. So that also goes back to my ME system as well. So it's got an output and an input, both hooked up to ME system, so I don't actually have to come up here and replace it. As I said, that was what I used initially, and then I built these big turbines. So I built this bigger reactor, which wasn't all the way at the top to start with, because there are two more turbines above, but I'd only started out with two, so it only went to about half this height. And as you can see, the power actually comes from these turbines spinning, which spin because of the steam that's processing through them. All right, this is also extremely resource dependent. These blocks in particular take up a huge amount of stuff, and you need ender pearls and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's very tricky to get. So here again, this is the speed at which it's the rotors are spinning, or the turbines are spinning. That's the steam that's in there, the water that's processing through it, which it generates once it cools, which can go back into the reactor. And this is the power, the internal. So because I'm using so much power, there's none left over in the battery. And that's the same for all of them. So there's, as I said, there's 4 of them, which will look pretty much the same, except for one of them where there might be a bit of excess power. They might actually show you that there's some. Okay, looks very similar here. All right, and then this is the one. So I probably don't need 4, but I need a little bit more than 3, which is why there's some storage here of power. But the rest is all being used up. And it just goes, as you can see, this is connected to my power, and it goes through my base. And you can actually see in the top left, it's showing you that it's full at the moment. So there's, it's backed up with power. So this powers the majority of my base, but for a lot of the machines that I'm going to show you in the next video, the last video, I actually needed a little bit more power because they're very power intensive. So I created a second power source just for some of those rooms, which is this here. Okay, and I apologize for the sound because it's right above the rooms that I'm going to show you tomorrow. Or not tomorrow, in the next video, sorry. But this is essentially the same kind of setup, but it's with a different mod pack. So that one's with bigger reactors. This one's from Mekanism, which I use for a lot of the machines that I'm going to show you tomorrow. And it's essentially the same thing. I'm going to go around this other side so it's a little less noisy. So I'm about to get attacked. No, didn't see it yet. Okay, so this is the same type of setup. Is that this is, and I'm going to have to go around to show you the control panel, but this is a nuclear reactor as well. Alright, looks very different because it's from a different mod pack. It has water input as well. Alright, and it has the fuel cells, which you can see from here. That's how many, and it also has water input here on the side. So it's doing the same thing. Let me just have a look here. It's got the water, the coolant. This is where the fuel's coming in, and there's the heated coolant, which will be steam, but the steam is processing through my turbine, so that's why there's none in here, and the waste, which is also being processed as well. And they're in there, which I'll finish up by talking about. So this is where the fuel comes through. It's a bit of a complicated process, and this is where the waste goes, also a little bit of a complicated process. So same thing here. This is the turbine where the steam's being processed to, so through that pipe, and then the water's coming back through that pipe. So it's the same thing here. So you can see that there's steam here, all right, and how much steam is coming in, and I must be using almost like exactly the right amount of power because the steam is really just staying at the same level. So I could turn the heat up if I wanted some more steam. And this thing on the side, this is actually a battery, so it actually stores the power rather than wasting any that's left over. But again, it's really, it's showing that it's using more power than it's actually inputting, so I should probably fix that if I was still really using my base. But it seems to be relatively stable here on this side, but that's probably because that's the only thing that's been inputted. But anyway, so that's what the point of this, and inside there are a bunch of what's basically batteries that store the power for this system here. And if I was still playing this, I would probably go and just fix that a little bit. Again, very resource dependent to be able to make these, but it's more, this is more of a late game type of building. All right, I'll just finish by showing you these in here. Not super exciting or anything like that, but I'll just explain some of the process. It's not as easy as the one that I showed you first because you just need the uranium input and you're basically good to go. With this mod, it does take quite a few steps to process. So you can see there's all these machines are a different step because you're trying to get different things out of them. So this one's processing water into the two different separate parts. Okay, some of which I'm only using here. So you can see that the oxygen's going here while the hydrogen I don't need, so it's staying in here and things like that. So it's processing through, but the main core of this is that it's enriching the uranium into yellowcake uranium. So this mod still uses the uranium, but changes it to something from Mekanism that they can actually use. And then it gets processed and goes through all of these things with a couple other things as well. Like I think I need sulfur here, and then the sulfur gets processed and so on until it goes to here, the centrifuge, and out of the centrifuge, we're changing this into the fissile fuel that can actually be used in the reactor. So it flows through here to the outside. And at the end, as we talked about upstairs, you're going to get the depleted uranium, which in real life is actually something that you can't just leave lying around. It's going to cause lots of problems. So this mod kind of didn't, the bigger reactor mod kind of just left it at that, but Mekanism tried to make it a little bit more realistic, and you actually have to deal with the leftover. So it comes out, and then it gets processed again through here, and you can actually use a bunch of things to process it, and then it gets put into these radioactive waste barrels, which will actually break it down over time. So not quickly, but it does get broken down over time. So if I'll shift, you can see that in the top left corner it says that there's spent nuclear waste in there. Fair amount at the moment, but you can see there's still heaps of space for it because I'm not actually using up that much. So it is very involved, the process, but it's better than leaving it. So you can see nuclear waste, and then it gets processed. And I think the plutonium could actually be used for something else if I was going that way, but I never did anything with that, I think. Or maybe it turns it into the nuclear waste. But either way, that's the two systems that I'm using on my base, because it does require a lot of power. And then next time I'll show you what most of that power is used for, because as we've seen, like these two machines here are run off the power from my base, but the ones that I showed you in the basement, they all have their separate power systems because they do use so much power, even with these huge reactors that I've got. Anyway, I hope that was a little bit interesting. I look forward to showing you the last piece of my base. Enjoy.